So we just had these little traditions that we did, but it was where we just decompressed. There's not a lot of pressure of what we need to do. We're just spending quality time together. And I think that's a little bit of what it's like. So what's the decompression for you that you need? But then how do you also do it when your kids are with you, and how do you make it as easy for you to kind of ease into that next, part of the week?
Hi, I'm Veronica Cisneros, licensed marriage and family therapist, entrepreneur, and host of the Empowered and Unapologetic podcast. I was 1 month away from divorce. The court papers were filed. We had just had our first daughter, and I felt more alone than ever. My husband told me he was tired of competing with my career. I was overwhelmed, disconnected from my family, and questioning everything I had built. I didn't want to lose my marriage, but I also didn't want to keep losing myself. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I stopped pointing fingers and started doing the work on me. Now, after 25 plus years of marriage, raising 3 daughters, and running a thriving therapy practice, I'm here to help you do the same. This podcast is for the woman who looks like she has it all together, but secretly feels like she's falling apart. We're talking real marriage struggles, parenting teens, rebuilding trust, reclaiming identity, and finally feeling like you again. Pull up a seat. You don't have to figure it out alone. This is Empowered and Unapologetic. Have you ever felt like you're holding the entire world together? The kids, the job, the house, while quietly wondering if you are ever even allowed to fall apart. Maybe you've whispered to yourself, I can't keep doing this, but the thought of divorce feels too heavy, too messy, too unfixable. Well, today's episode is going to challenge everything you've been told about what a good divorce looks like. And yes, that's even possible. Hey, friend, welcome back to Empowered and Unapologetic, the podcast for working moms and women who are out there doing it all, managing careers, raising kids, and trying to keep their marriages and themselves from completely falling apart. I'm your host, Veronica Cisneros, therapist, wife, mom, and someone who's learned firsthand that even when life feels impossible, it's not over. It's just shifting. And today, we're diving into a topic that's real, raw, and often misunderstood: how to navigate divorce with grace, not guilt. My guest today is someone I deeply admire, Sarah Armstrong. She's the author of 2 books: The Art of the Juggling Act, Bite-Sized Guide for Working Parents, and The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce. She's also vice president of global marketing operations at Google, a mentor to women in business, and a proud mom to her daughter, Grace, who just graduated from college. Sarah's lived it. She's been through the emotional chaos of divorce while leading a massive corporate career and raising a daughter on her own. And what I love most about her work is that it's not about surviving divorce, it's about growing through it. So if you've ever asked yourself how to rebuild your life without breaking your kids in the process, this episode is for you. Sarah, you're a complete badass. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, Veronica, thank you so much for having me. Really, really looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, I'm so excited. All right, so everybody grab a pen and paper. By the end of this conversation, you'll learn how to set and protect your boundaries, even when guilt tries to break them, how to use transference of hours, a concept to reclaim time and energy. I totally need that in my life. And then why creating decompression zone between work and home might just save your sanity. You'll walk away with real tools you can implement today, not next month, not after the chaos settles, today. So, Sarah, thank you again so much for joining us. I want to get to know you. And one thing I love is that you bring intention into something most people only approach with emotion. You talk about boundaries, and let's be real, as women, we are terrible at that. We feel selfish for saying no. So Can you walk us through how to actually set and protect those boundaries during divorce without losing ourselves in the process?
Yeah, no, it's such an important topic, Veronica. And I think one of the things, and first, I just divorce in general. I just want to, I like to say one thing at the beginning. I'm not an advocate for divorce. I think, if couples can stay married for the long term, that's amazing.
Yeah,
But unfortunately, divorce is very common in our society. And if it is, there's a way to do it. So when it comes to boundaries, though, I think the first thing with boundaries is that you need to think about what are the boundaries you need to live the life that you now are going to lead as a single working mom
yep,
in terms of raising kids. And the thing about boundaries is you first have to think about what you want them to be, but then you have to tell those around you that those boundaries exist because no one can respect boundaries if they don't know they exist. And they will walk all over them every day
every day.
if because you haven't shared them with the people around you, whether it's within your work environment, even in your kind of home environment, whichever place you're trying to protect those boundaries. So my personal example is my daughter Grace, as you mentioned. She was 7 when we got divorced, and I was
Mm,
definitely trying to figure out how am I going to do this? How am I going to raise her and be there for her and
yeah,
still deliver on this? And I was in a global role. It was, uh, lots of late night calls and early morning
yep.
calls and all that comes with me talking to people around the world. And so what I did is on my calendar, I blocked Grace time. And what Grace time was is every night from 6 to 8. And this sounds like, okay, it's 2 hours in the day, by the way. Those were her hours and no one could touch them. And
Mm,
so even though someone would say, "Oh, I need to talk to you at 6:30," I'm like, "I can talk to you at 8:30, or I can talk to you at 8:30 tomorrow morning." But 6 to 8 was her time. And the reason that was so important is because of being in a divorce situation, there were only certain nights I was with her. And she deserved to have those 2 hours with mom, coming home and being fully present with her before I put her to bed. And, that was her time.
yeah.
And so I was very, very diligent. And then I also said to my assistant, I'm in a situation where I have an assistant at work, and I said, no one touches that time.
Yeah.
And she helped me protect it as well. So that's just an example, but I think it's about being very intentional, putting it out there. It literally said that on my work calendar that people could see Grace time,
Yep.
and I feel good about it because over the course of raising Grace in those years, that was her time, and I really did stick to it.
That's so, so hard. It is so, so hard because we tend to sacrifice our kids' time, our personal time to meet the
Mhm.
demands of our work or our career.
Work,
Yeah.
yes,
When I saw your
yeah.
book title, The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce, I literally stopped scrolling
Mhm.
because those two words, good and divorce, rarely belong in the same sentence. And
Yes,
right now, before we get into those three key strategies, just want to say this.
yeah,
So many women
yeah.
listening right now are carrying guilt. They're trying to be everything to everyone while secretly wondering if
Mhm,
they failed as a wife, as a mom, as a woman.
mhm,
But what I love about your work, Sarah, is that you remind us we can rewrite the story one intentional decision at a time. And so,
mhm.
you started us off with setting and protecting our boundaries because I'm going to be honest, boundaries are where we struggle the most. We say yes when we're
Yeah,
exhausted, we take on too much
yeah,
because we're afraid of disappointing
mhm,
someone. So, I want
yeah,
every listener to think about this. What would it look like if I said no without guilt just once this week? That one moment of
mhm,
honesty might be the start of protecting your peace. So,
yeah,
you did this with your daughter, right?
mhm. I
How
did.
like,
Yeah,
was it like one and done and it was like, "Okay, I'm good to go for the rest of my life," or because I can imagine, like, I think about me, like, as you were saying that, I'm like, "Okay, well, once I'm off of work, I'm off of work, but am I really off? I'm checking my
yeah,
phone."
mhm,
I'm thinking, "Okay, well, there is this thought, Sarah, I have to be honest, there's this thought where it's like, okay, really? Only 2 hours for Grace? Like, poor Grace." But then I think
yeah,
about it and it's like, "Holy shit, like, those are her 2 solid hours. Mom's not on her
yeah,
phone. Mom's not looking at
right,
anything. Mom's not distracted at
right,
all." And it's like, okay, wait a
yeah,
minute. I don't even think I spend an hour alone with my kids where I'm not
yeah,
distracted by something.
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna give 2 really important thoughts or tips here. One is the physical boundary of what you do with your technology. It's what you just said. So I coined the term find a cupboard. Okay. So
Okay.
I know a lot of us work from home, by the way. And so this also has, it might be closing a door, but let's stick with find a cupboard. I worked out of the home for Grace's as I was raising Grace. I would come home at night and I would put my laptop, my tote in a cupboard. It would literally go away. And for those couple hours, to your point of being with Grace, I was not on my laptop. My phone was put in a cupboard to charge. It was her time because if we put our laptops on the kitchen counter or on the table, even if they're closed, they're talking to us.
Oh
They're
gosh,
literally drawing us in,
hard. It's
and
hard.
just even mentally, even if they're not open and you're not typing on the keyboard, they are reminding you of stuff you should be doing or that you need to do, and you aren't present. You're not there.
No.
And so my goal was that Grace would never really interact with my work laptop or see it as part of. I didn't want her attaching that to me. Like that was something I really was like because so much of my day was my career and working. I thought, I don't want her to then, well, mom comes home and all she is looking at her laptop. So I really took that to heart. And it was something that I found that cupboard. And then we had a little charging spot for the phones. And that was a little cupboard in the kitchen. And they were just out of sight. Now, obviously, our phones are like our remote controls for our lives these days. So it's harder and harder to do that. But even if you put it, just tuck it away somewhere where it's not just in your hand all the time and you're looking at it, that's a huge step. The second thing you said at the beginning, which I think is really important, is about the power of saying no.
Yeah.
And one of the things, especially as women, I think we feel first it's hard to say no, but then we have to give a reason as why, in terms of why we're saying no,
Yeah.
right? We have to explain
Yeah.
ourselves.
Yeah.
And so one of the best pieces of advice, and I was only given this about 8 years ago, and I wish I was given it 30 plus years ago when I started my career, is when you have to say no for something, whether it's not attending a work meeting or not attending a party or a volunteer invitation, whatever the case is, all you need to say is, I'm sorry, I can't make it. You do not need to give the reason why you can't make it. Because the minute you give the reason why,
You
the
scare
other
yourself.
person is judging you on whether or not you made the right decision of how you're using your time. And that's not for them to judge. And so I was in a work situation where I said to this colleague of mine, I'm sorry, I can't make this. And I was explaining, and he stopped me mid sentence and said, Sarah, you do not need to tell me why you can't make it. You just need to say you can't make it.
Yeah.
Because the minute you tell me, I'm judging you. And I'm thinking, well,
Oh.
I would prioritize this meeting over your meeting and or the reason you're choosing not to join me for this meeting. And so it was one of the most empowering pieces of advice I have ever been given in terms of how to interact both professionally and personally.
Yep.
And I think to your earlier point, we feel guilty when we say no, and we have to know that we're making the best decision for us at the time
Yeah.
when we say no, and we need to feel okay about it and move away from the guilt.
Yeah. No, that is so, so true. And I've never thought about it that way. That the minute we start coming up with excuses, we've now given that other person permission to dictate our lives, our choices. Ugh, that's so gross. Why do we do that? Why do we do that? I've been guilty of that too. Like dependent on like who I'm saying no to. Like I've gotten better
Yeah.
with saying no to my family, even though there's so much judgment. Holy shit, is there judgment? There's judgment. There's all of these facial expressions, But when it comes to certain meetings, or I think it's more professionally that
Mhm.
when I'm interacting with other professionals that I have a great level of respect for. Those are the ones that
Mhm.
are like, I know their time is 1,000% valuable. Those are the ones that I have a really, really hard time saying no to because I'm like, well, shit, like this is the only
Mhm.
spot they have. Veronica, you better make it work.
Right.
It is,
Right.
it is so hard. Now,
Yeah. Now there's a difference. One quick thing, Veronica. There's a
yeah,
difference between deciding that you want to reshuffle things to make something work versus saying no because no is the best thing for you. Because those are two different things. One's a
thank you.
prioritization,
Thank
right?
you.
Discussion, one's a prioritization discussion of, what, that one, that actually, that request, I'm going to think about that one. That one I'm willing to move things around. But the ones where you can't, and it's like, no, this, I know that this trumps that.
Yeah.
That's the one where you have to say no with the confidence to say, I'm sorry, that's going to work. We're going to have to find a different time. Or I
Totally.
can't make it. Maybe it's just, I can't make it.
Yeah.
And, I just think, and again, as a working mom, as a single working mom, I go back to, especially as you get into like managing the school side of things with your kids' school and all the requests that come through of how you're supposed to show up in all these different places at all these different
Mm-hmm.
times, and
Mm-hmm.
the pressure
Yep.
of that. And just, early on decided, I'm going to just choose one thing at Grace's school when she was growing up, and I'm going to do that consistently as a tradition. But I'm not going to be able to do all these other things that the either stay-at-home moms are doing or moms with more flexible working schedules than I
Yeah.
had were going to be able to participate in. And so again, it was one of those things where it was a combination of saying no, but also figuring out where I could fit in and where I could contribute and feel good that Grace saw mom involved in her school, in her classroom in that moment.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a piece of it too, is just really thinking, it sounds funny, but thinking very strategically about when and how you can show up so that you can not feel guilty.
Yep.
You can feel good. Your kids feel good that you're there for them. And I'll never forget the first morning of, kindergarten when you walk in and at least back in the day, and now it's probably all online, but there were all the papers where you had to literally hand sign up for things in the
Oh
classroom. And
God.
I
Yeah.
stood in front of this, right? And I stood in front of this huge table. And I was like, wow, okay. Like, which one am I going to choose? So randomly, I chose Valentine's Day. I don't know. I just said, you know what, that looks good. And so for all of Grace's from kindergarten through the time they allowed moms or dads to come in the classroom and help with parties, I did Valentine's Day. And
There you
we
go.
did these little special, we did these little special cookies Grace and I made together, and these little Jello like hearts that we made. And what's funny is the tradition of it, Veronica, became something that even at high school graduation, I had kids that walked up and were like, Miss Sarah, I remember those little Jello hearts you made.
Oh.
And I was like, oh my God, those were so fun. But it's like, the tradition. And like,
Yes.
even though I wasn't there all the time, that's what Grace and her friends remembered of Grace's mom being
I love that. I love that so much. Sarah,
there. Yeah.
you also talk about something you call transference of hours. And this concept blew
Yeah.
my mind because after any major life change, especially divorce, we suddenly have
Hmm.
this gap of time that used to be filled with
Yeah.
someone else's presence, their energy, their needs.
Hmm.
But here's the
Hmm.
thing, those hours don't have to disappear. You get to transfer them, you
Yeah.
get to pour them into yourself, your growth, and your kids and your dreams.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
can you take us through what that is? Transference?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. So I think first of all, I mean, we always joke there's not enough hours in the day, right? There's 24/7, and we do need to sleep, as you and I talked about earlier. Need to
Yeah.
get some sleep. But I think one of the things, if you're trying to be a single working mom that's delivering on being the best mom you can be, and focus on being the best mom you can be, and also delivering on your career and the demands of that, it may not all, first of all, fall into a normal schedule. And I say normal in air quotes. There's
Yeah.
going to be times where you may have to leave work a little early to get something done for your child or children. But the work still needs to get done. So you're going to do it later in the evening. Or you're going to decide that, you know what, I'm going to, you know, shift my schedule a bit to make these two worlds work the way that they need to.
Yeah.
And so I always said, I actually left at what would probably, for the role that I was in, probably on the earlier side of the evening because I did want to go home and have that grace time.
Yeah.
But then I knew that I needed to get back on and do calls or do work in the evening to get things done. And so that's why I say it doesn't always have to fit in what you would define as the traditional working day.
Okay.
Um, also the transfer of hours applies to how you're taking care of yourself. Okay, because one of the things that I think we do is we negotiate with ourselves what we can or can't do. And I think we need to put some hard lines of what we won't transfer out of
Yeah.
transfer out of our hours, and that's the care for yourself. And what is it in a given week that you need so that you can be the best mom and the best peer and colleague at work? And what is that? So it may be that you need to get your workout in. It may be that you need to go see your therapist. It may be that you need to get a massage or get your nails done or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But making sure that you're giving yourself that and figuring out where that fits in is so fundamental, Veronica, as you know, to
Yeah.
feeling like you're holding it all together and
Yeah.
not allowing yourself to transfer those out and say they don't actually get,
Exist. Yeah.
you know, exist, and is so important because if we don't take care of ourselves, we can't show up in the ways that we need to, both in our personal lives, for our kids, for our family, for our
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
or at work,
So
you know?
I just did this. I hired a trainer because I was like, listen, I can't do this anymore. Like this ain't
Mhm.
sexy. I mean, okay, sure, it's sexy, but not where I know I could be, right? And I hired a
Yep.
trainer, and we were going, we do weekly meetings, and she's like, Veronica,
Mhm.
what we haven't figured out is we've now added working out on an already busy schedule. We have to
Mhm.
take something out, because if not, this is
Mhm.
just going to be something you did for like a month and then it's over.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I ended up, this the crazy part. So I was like, okay, what the hell can I delete? What can I transfer over? What can I
Mhm.
change in my life? I'm looking at everything, and it's
Mhm.
like every single minute is assigned to something.
Mhm.
Like I value
Mhm.
my time. I value it to the next level. And then I ended up, crazy enough, I ended up getting a notification, and it was my screen
Mhm.
time. And I'm looking at it, and I was like, holy shit, my screen time is only an hour for the week. Where before I had started working out, it
Mhm.
was 8 hours, 12 hours for the week.
Yep.
And I was like, oh shit, I've been working out every
Mhm.
day for about an hour and a half.
Mhm.
That's where
Mhm.
the hours were transferred to. Hours I didn't even know existed, but they did. They did.
They
So
did.
is that what you're talking
Yes.
about?
Yes. Yes. That's what I'm talking about. And I think it's us really, I mean, I think if you're wanting to juggle all that we need to juggle in life, it is literally looking at your day and saying, how is it that I really want to spend my time? And you will, and then if it's important enough to you, you will figure out how to create that space.
Yeah.
And by the way, I do think, Veronica, it's also depending on the age of your children. Like when you have little ones at home
Oh
that
yeah, it's
can't
hard.
dress themselves at all, it is a hard thing to
Listen,
figure
when
out
they're
how you give that
23 and
out.
18, you're still in that. You're still you're still asking those questions.
You are, but it is different.
It's
It is, you do get
different.
some hours back. I mean,
Yeah.
the day Grace could drive herself to school, and I was like, oh my gosh, no more morning carpool. No, so I think it's just one of those things. What you just articulated is a great example. You know, there's things we spend our time doing that is that really adding value to your
Yeah.
day to day? Is that screen time really, or could you go and do something that really invests in you? It makes you feel so much better for the day, or so much, you know. And the other thing, and it's an important one, and I say this because of just where we are in our life these days, is your doctor's appointments and those appointments that are really important.
Yeah.
I say to women specifically, don't reschedule them. Do
Thank
not
you for
reschedule
saying
them.
that.
Make sure, and because the reason I say this is we would never reschedule our hair appointment. We'll
No.
always make our, you know, we'll, we'll always go do things that are important to us in that way, but don't reschedule those doctor's appointments and those things that you know you need to do. And I only say that because I think I was one of those that rescheduled. You know,
Yeah.
I'm too busy. Oh, I've got that meeting. I can't do that. I'd always make sure Grace got to hers, but early in my raising Grace phase of that single momhood, I was pushing things. You know, it was okay that
Yeah.
and you know, you get to a stage where you're like, no, no, that's not okay.
Feel like, oh
And so
shit.
I say that yeah, yeah, yeah. And so I say to the younger me that if I were to tell the younger me something, it would be, you know, hold those appointments. It really has to be a big deal for you to shift them, because otherwise, that's not actually also caring for yourself the way you
Yeah.
need to. It's my little PSA on that.
No, exactly. Nothing breaks my heart more than watching women pour into everyone else and feel like they've completely lost themselves in the process. That's why I have founded Outside the Norm Counseling, because therapy shouldn't feel like one more thing on your to-do list. It should feel like relief. I'm Veronica Cisneros, licensed marriage and family therapist and host of the Empowered and Unapologetic podcast. And I know what it's like to look around at your life and think, why does everything feel fine, but feel so off? At Outside the Norm Counseling, we help women who are high functioning on the outside, but silently falling apart inside. Women who are waking up overwhelmed, snapping at the people they love, and carrying guilt that never seems to lift. And if you're not ready for therapy, that's okay. Let's start small. With my self-paced course, Reignite Your Marriage and Reclaim Your Identity. This is for you, not your husband. Because when you reconnect with yourself, everything else begins to shift. Head to OutsideTheNormCounseling.com to start. Remember, you don't have to keep holding it all together. You just have to take the first step. One of my favorite ideas from your book is the decompression zone. For my audience, women who go straight from meetings to motherhood, what exactly is a decompression zone and why is it so crucial?
Yeah. So there's a couple of different ways to think about a decompression zone. And I'm also going to say it's different for those that work from home 100% versus
Okay.
if you actually leave the house and have a commute. So I'm going to take them in two parts. If you leave the house and have a commute, your decompression zone is in a couple different places. One is actually the commute to and from work
Okay.
can be seen as a decompression zone. So some people lament a long commute, but I actually think if you think about it, that is a gift of time for you to do nothing, first of all, except for maybe just think, listen to a podcast, call a friend or family member, listen to some music, but it's your time. It's your half an hour, 45 minutes, hour and a half, whatever the commute is. And to really think about how you use that time, but also to decompress and transfer from work into being the mom or
Yeah.
from being the mom into work, whichever way you're going. And so I always said, see that as a gift of time and where you can decompress and or kind of mentally prepare
Yeah.
versus lamenting that time. So that's one place. The other decompression zone moment I think is really key is Friday evenings. And how do you transition from the craziness of a work week into, okay, we're into the weekend. And so one of the things we did early on, and this is actually when I was still married, but we continued the tradition even after, is in the early days when Grace was young, we had another couple down the street and we'd walk to this little Mexican restaurant near our neighborhood and we had what was called chips and cheese night. It was like, we got two tables, the kids had a table, we had a table, there were margaritas. I think Grace ate more baskets of chips and cheese and whatever guac. And,
Listen,
it didn't
that's a
matter.
great
Like
meal.
what I said, exactly, that's a meal. So, but the point was, it was just all of us like taking a deep breath, getting through. It was a fun tradition. Grace had time with her friends. We had time with friends. And then down the road, I transitioned as she got older and post divorce, where we had movie and sushi night. Again, not big things, but these are little traditions that on a Friday night I ordered in sushi. I'm like, I don't feel like cooking.
Yeah.
Grace and I would alternate which movies I wanted to expose her to movies from the 80s, my era, and she was exposing me. And so we just had these little traditions that we did, but it was where we just decompressed. There's not a lot of pressure of what we need to do. We're just spending quality time together.
Yeah.
And I think that's a little bit of what it's like. So what's the decompression for you that you need? But then how do you also do it when your kids are with you? And how do you make it as easy for you to kind of ease into that next, part of the week?
Yeah, those ones I appreciate you using the drive. I I didn't even I have realized it, but I don't think I've implemented this skill. I usually
Yeah.
will use that drive to like quickly read an email in between lights because I literally I my office is like 12
Mhm.
minutes from my house.
Okay.
Um
Yeah.
and it's like, wait a minute, this is time where I get to reset. And I
Yes.
struggle, I'm just going to be honest with you. I struggle so
Hmm.
much with just sitting there, driving and
Hmm.
listening to music. I
Hmm.
don't feel productive. This time could be
Hmm.
used
Hmm.
checking emails, doing something else. Like, so
Hmm.
for those of us who are what do I want to coin us? Overachievers. We want to get so much shit done. Like, why do we have such a hard time just listening to the damn radio and relaxing?
Yeah. It is, it's an interesting question, and it is something I think we feel guilty. I think we feel guilty that we should be doing something more. It's like, those are the moments where we need to give ourselves a little bit of a break, like a
Yeah,
little bit of just like if that's 12 minutes for you to just like think or just listen to music and or call a friend and say, "Hey, I have 10 minutes. I have a funny story I need to tell you." Like, but it's your time, and it's like, how do you want to use that time? And it doesn't have to be tied to responding to an email or doing a work call.
yeah,
It can be something else. So I think that's like the other thing. I do want to go back to the stay-at-home mom, or the working mom that stays
yeah.
at home because it is a totally different dynamic. And I had one gal that I was talking to, and she said, I walk at the end of my day, I walk outside and I tell my kids, "Hey, mom's out in the yard, but I'm I'm out there just." And she goes, "I walk around my yard. I'm not leaving, but I'm just." She goes, "I just need a little time. I need a." And
Yeah.
she said, "I'm out there for 15 or 20 minutes. I'm just like walking around." And I said, we all need that time.
Yeah, we
To
do.
go from, especially
We
when you're working
do.
from home, right? When you walk out of your home office or walk from the kitchen table where you're working to like into life with your kids, that transition is such a hard pivot that we need to give ourselves a couple minutes of
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm shifting over. I'm now mom. I'm not in work mode
Yeah.
because if we don't do that, I'm not sure we show up in either place well in terms
Yeah.
of how we want to show up and
So
how. So
true.
I just think it's something to think about for those of us that, and I do a bit of a hybrid. I work from home and now, and but I can see where with young kids in the house, and if you're working from home, you do need to figure out how do you give yourself a little bit of that transition moment.
Yeah, I love that. So you've said before that kids mirror how we handle life's hardest moments. What have you learned about modeling grace through your divorce?
I think the thing that I say with divorce is, and I definitely believe this, is you can decide how to show up in lots of different instances, but I've always said take the high road. And the reason I say take the high road is that taking the high road can be a very steep road, by the way. It can be
Yeah.
really steep,
Yeah.
but it's so important to always think about what's going to be best for your kids. And the example, and one thing that my ex-husband and I really tried to model, and we're very conscious about this with raising Grace together, is we wanted to be there for her.
Yeah.
Like the reason we decided to no longer be married or together, but we wanted Grace to always know that we were there for her. And so whether it was going to
Yeah.
soccer games and standing on the sideline together, or
Yep.
being at the school ceremony where where awards are being, she could look and we were both there. But the really interesting one that sticks with me is when she was in sixth grade at her school, the parent teacher conferences, the kids would go with the parents to the teacher conference and talk about how they're doing in school. So my ex-husband and I went, and Grace was with us, and we sat down and we went through this hour-long conversation with the teacher. And at the end of it, the teacher looked at us. She goes, "Wait a minute, are you two divorced?" And I said, "Oh yeah, we've been divorced for 5 years." She goes, "I had no idea." And I said,
Mhm.
"Huh, well, it didn't occur to me to walk in here and say, 'Hi, we're divorced. Can we talk
Yeah.
about Grace's education and how she's doing in
Yeah.
school?'" And she said to me, "You would be shocked at how few parents that are in a divorce situation can walk
Oh,
into
yeah.
this office
Yeah.
and sit down for 1 hour and talk about how their kid with their child and talk about how their child is doing in school." She goes, "It is very, very rare."
It
And
is.
she goes, "And it really makes me sad." And I said, "It makes me really sad because what's more important to two parents besides their children's health?
Yeah.
The second thing is generally like, how is their child doing in school?" And by the way, Grace is hearing this whole discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. And I said, it, it's, but that's one of the examples, like in terms of showing up and be and with Grace and, taking the high road, like we're there for her. It doesn't matter how
Yeah.
we feel about each other. We're there for her. And I think people that go couples that go through divorce lose that
Yeah.
understanding of what's important, and that their kids see and experience everything. And so
Yeah.
every interaction is is sending them a signal.
How did you know it was time for divorce? I get a lot of women. One of my specialties is couples and women's
Mhm,
issues. And one thing I
mhm,
often get from women is, I didn't even know I was unhappy. And,
yeah,
I had an affair, or
mhm,
I don't want to go home. I carry
yeah,
so much resentment towards my husband. How did I not
mhm,
know I wasn't happy? Like this, how didn't I know?
yeah. Yeah, well, I think everyone's paths are different. I mean, my ex-husband and I decided that this wasn't what we were meant to, whether we weren't meant to be together, and we made that decision. And in doing that, but that was the thing, Veronica. I had watched really ugly divorces growing. My
Yeah.
parents, by the way, have been married for 50. My parents have been married for 57 years. They're like the picture of a beautiful partnership, and I had that as a model, and I thought that's what we were going to be. It didn't work out that way, and so, but when we realized that, I said to him, I go, "Look, if we're going to do this, I want to do it. I don't want to do it how I watched divorces growing up. I just Grace didn't choose this, right? She
Yeah.
didn't get to choose this situation, and so we were very intentional. And you talked to her, like we were very intentional about the approach we took. And one of the really amazing moments is a year after our divorce. So Grace was 7 when we got divorced. When she was 8, she and I were standing at a CVS like checking out, and there was a People magazine on the newsstand. There was a celebrity couple getting a divorce on the cover, and she looked at me. She goes, "Mommy, is that a good divorce or a bad divorce?"
Mm.
And I looked at her and I said, "Well, what's the difference?" She goes, "Well, a good divorce is when the mommy and daddy are nice to each other, like you and daddy, and a bad divorce is when they scream and yell at each other."
Yeah.
And I stopped and I go, "Oh," I said, "Well," I go, "it's hard to tell from the magazine cover, Grace,
Yeah.
what that divorce looks like." But I walked out of that CVS that day, Veronica. I said, "Whatever my ex-husband and I were doing, the fact that Grace, a year after we have literally changed her life so fundamentally, she's the one going back and forth between two homes, is referring to our divorce as a good divorce."
Yeah.
I mean, she's really the one that coined the phrase that you mentioned earlier. I thought we were doing something that was allowing her to feel okay about it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing is, really stepping back and thinking, and I don't think that you said it earlier, there's not enough conversation about the topic of how to have a good divorce in
I
society.
know.
And so one of my goals, the reason I talked to you and I wrote this book, it's to change the societal perception that a good divorce is actually an attainable outcome. Because if 50% of marriages are going to end in divorce, why can't they actually be good?
Yeah.
Why can't we, if we're going to do it, might as well do it well, right?
Yeah.
And you said, I have so many people that'll stop and they'll go, a good, like very skeptical when they heard my title, like
Yeah.
a good divorce, and I get the eyebrow raise. And I've had people say, I had one friend go, I know one other person that has a divorce like you have had. And I said, what? I go, one, I go, wouldn't it be great if most of them were
Yeah.
like this? I mean, again, if you're going to go through it, why would more of them be, you know,
Mhm.
good and versus it being this horrible, bitter thing that leaves? Because I just don't think we don't, divorce is an action, right? You get
Yeah.
divorced. It should not be a negative cloud that follows you and your children through the rest of their lives. It really
No.
shouldn't. I mean, it happened. And I think sometimes, unfortunately, that society wants
Uh-huh.
to put that scarlet letter on. It's like we're
Yeah.
supposed to carry that as like the negative thing that we did,
Yep.
and that it's this negative thing. I'm just like, why? Why do we have to carry that scarlet letter?
What would you say are the key elements, like if you had to list them in maybe
Hmm.
like even steps, what would you say are the
Hmm.
key steps or key elements a woman needs to have a good divorce? And I say a woman because we can't control, our husbands.
Yeah, you can't control the husband. Yeah, no question. I think there's a couple key elements. I think first of all is your mindset that you want to actually try to do it this way, and then explain to your partner, your soon to be ex spouse, that you'd like to go this route. Now, sometimes you have a not willing co parent, and to your
Yeah.
point, you can't control that part. So you have to control the pieces you can control. But what you control is your mindset. You can control your actions. You can control how you react in moments. I say that you need to build what I call a compartmentalization muscle.
Okay.
Okay, a compartmentalization muscle is something that the emotions run high, both pre, during, and even post divorce on this topic. And if you're on that emotional roller coaster, there can be things that trigger, high emotion. You have to decide when that emotion is triggered, do you show that emotion at that time if your children are around?
Yeah.
Because if they're around, they will remember the reactions you have in those moments,
Yes.
and they will carry them with them for a very long time. And so I say, you know what? I'm not saying to stuff the emotions in and never let them out, but in the moment where the button has been pushed and you've been triggered by something your ex-spouse has said or done, stop for a moment and just take a deep breath and react to it later. You can go and take a long walk and cry or call a friend and yell or talk to your therapist,
Yeah.
whatever you need to do. But don't react in the moment when your children are within earshot or in the situation.
Yep.
Try not to. I know it's so hard. I know this is one of the hardest things to do. But if you can do that, I think you're helping you're giving a gift to your children because they're not getting the emotional scars and baggage of those moments.
Bingo.
And honestly, you're giving, and that's the most important thing. The also thing is you give yourself time to process it in the way that you should in a different place. And I think both of those are important. So I think mindset and the intent of like positive intent of what you're going to try to do and that compartmentalization muscle are two of the most important things. And the third thing, and then is having a very clear parenting plan that you've outlined with your ex-spouse of how you're going to raise your kids, and look for the period of time you're going to raise them together, even decisions you don't think you want to worry about now. try to make them or try to put a stake in the ground, because ideas will change and other people will come in the mix that influence decisions. And so I'd say a very clear parenting plan is the other key piece, because you can always go back to it and say, well, this is how we had decided we wanted to do X, whatever X is.
Yeah.
And so those would be three really important things that I think can put you on the path of heading towards what could be deemed a good divorce.
I love that. I love that. And I love that you stressed on, if you're caught up in your emotion, take that break, don't respond. Research studies show that 97% of conversations that start with this harsh startup where it's emotionally driven, they fail. They fail. So we already know that. If we already know research support, like, literally has shown that the conversation is going to go nowhere, just stay quiet, walk away, walk away, walk away,
Yeah,
walk away.
absolutely. Absolutely. It is. And the best thing to do is just to go and just take a deep breath, walk away. And again, it's not that I'm saying you shouldn't react, or in your
Yeah.
own moment react somewhere else, because you don't want to putting them those emotions instead and not letting them out is also not healthy. So
Yeah.
you want to let them out. I'm just saying, when your kids are around, they notice everything. They see everything, they take it in.
Yes, they
And I just
do.
don't think they should not be the collateral damage because you
Yeah.
decided to get a divorce.
Yeah. Looking back, what surprised you most about your own strength as a mom through this process?
That's a great question. I think I'm a very independent person by nature, but I think the life I've lived post divorce is quite honestly been even more amazing than I could have imagined.
Yeah.
And the things I've achieved both for myself and for Grace, and less, I'd say less the career achievement. Quite honestly, writing these books that I've written, I would never have imagined. I don't fashion myself a writer, ironically. So, the things that have kind of, it's very funny. I've written two books, but the things that have unfolded post divorce, and what, the life that I'm living, I'm very proud of it. And,
Yeah.
I had someone recently tell me that I make divorce look too good.
Yeah.
And I said to them, wow, I said, I'm just trying to live a really happy life and
Yeah.
enjoy life and enjoy. So if I'm making divorce too good, I'm unapologetic about that.
Yes.
Because again, I got divorced. It's part of my history, but it isn't part of. I don't think it's part of who I am. Like, it's not.
No.
It shouldn't define me. And so I
Yeah.
think that's the thing, is just showing that you can live an amazing, happy, fulfilled life, and be divorced. And I
Yeah.
think that's the most important thing I would want women out there that are either considering it, in it, or already post divorce but are trying to figure out what life looks like,
Yep.
is just realize it's one of the worst things you could go through emotionally, no question. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy.
No.
It is not fun, and I'm not trying to in any way claim that it's easy, but I do think it's doable with certain ways of approaching it to then get into the next phase of your life. Because I always say, you get divorced because you're not happy in your current situation.
Yep.
The goal is to be happy after you get divorced. The goal is to figure out what you want life to look like for you and your children after divorce, and put yourselves on a more positive path.
Sarah, for the mom who's still in that fog, that place where she's not sure how to move forward, what would you say your message is to her?
I think if you're still in the fog, and the thing I wanted to be able to say to Grace years later is that I did everything I could to
Yeah.
stay in the marriage and to be to keep the family in under one roof. I
Yeah.
wanted that to be something I could say to her. And so if you're in a fog and you still don't feel like you can answer that question 100%, then I would stay and do all you can. Till, and when you feel like, what, I can answer honestly that I've done all I can, and this is now the path we need to go, then that's the time to consider and think through what those steps look like.
Yeah.
And and this the book I've written, The Mom's Guide to a Good Divorce, takes you through preparing for the change, like things you have to think about during the change and then post the change. And that preparing for the change, really thinking about all that you have to think about, because I always say, you don't, no one gets married to get divorced, right?
Yeah.
So, and no one gets divorced for positive reasons. And children are going to be the most significantly impacted by that. But you also don't grow up thinking, oh, so when I get divorced, this is how I'm going to handle it.
Yeah.
It's not something, we think about how we want to get married. We think about the wedding. We never think about, if you're undoing all of this. So I think the thing to realize is there are ways to do it. And it's a very, very detailed process to go through. And there's a lot of decisions to be made and a lot of discussions to be had. And Don't feel like you have to tackle it all at once, but take it and try to break it down into bite-sized pieces. And that's what my book tries to do,
Yep.
so that you can think through what you need to do to go down that path.
I love that. Sarah, for those women that are ready to work with you, where can our listeners connect with you and find your books?
So yeah, so I have two websites for the specific books. Gooddivorce.guide is where the mom's guide to good divorce, and my contact information is there. And then thejugglinact.com is where the Art of the Juggling Act book and all the details on, the juggling act of being a working parent is there. So either of those, all my contact information is there. Please feel free to reach out. And I just hope that those that are listening know that it is one of the most important things to do is think through how you're going to approach this change. But know that you're not alone. A lot of people have gone through it, and hopefully you can find the help you need. And hopefully my book is one of those places you can go for that help.
I love this. Ladies, if this episode hit home for you, you don't have to do this alone. Obviously, connect. Sarah, thank you so very much for all of your resources, for just your vulnerability and your transparency. And holy moly, did you educate us to this next level. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for having me. I really enjoyed spending time with you.
Absolutely. Ladies, remember, you're not broken, you're becoming. I'll see you next week. Raise your hand if you are ready to level up your marriage for 2023. Do you find that you're spending your time together with your husband checked out and in front of the TV? I know you're ready for tangible strategies that actually get you results. Reignite the spark in your marriage, have fun, and grow together. Well, I hope you have your hand raised at this minute because I have something special for you. I'm introducing my brand new 6-question marriage predictor quiz that's gonna give you personalized results to catapult you into the next stage of your marriage journey. That means you'll receive the results to where your marriage can get the best help. If you've got just 1 minute, head to veronicacisneros.org/quiz. Again, that's veronicacisneros.org/quiz, and you can take my brand new quiz, Marriage Predictor. Get your results delivered right to your email address. Again, that's veronicacisneros.org/quiz, veronicacisneros.org/quiz. What's up, ladies? Just want to let you guys know that your ratings and reviews for this podcast are greatly appreciated. If you love this podcast, please go to iTunes right now, write a review, rate the episode, and subscribe. Don't forget to share it with your friends.